All right, so first off, good morning. My name is Jim Hansen. I'm the VP of Product Management and Product Marketing for both our security products and our cloud products. And first off, I'm pretty excited to be here. I've not done a field day like this in the past, so it's great to see all of you guys here in the room and for those of you that are online as well. You heard Joe Kim earlier this morning talk about security and the fact that our business as an organization is built on providing IT professionals with the ability to go solve pretty basic IT challenges that they have. And the reality is that when you look at it through the security lens as well, a lot of our customers, a lot of IT professionals, they struggle with solving security problems too. And that's where, as we've started focusing a little bit more over the last year on building out our security portfolio, we have a number of different products that really help our customers go solve some of those foundational problems. The solution that I'm actually going to talk with you guys today about is called Access Rights Manager. And Access Rights Manager is really the newest addition to our security portfolio. And I mentioned there's a bunch of other things inclusive to NCM, which you saw earlier. We've got a threat monitor and log and event manager solution, which help people detect threats, respond to threats, and so forth and so on. And what Access Rights Manager is designed to do is make it easy for IT admins and security admins to just get more control over their Active Directory environments, their OneDrive, SharePoint, and so forth, so they can get a better picture of what those permissions look like within their environment. The reality is, when you look at permissions and you look how Active Directory gets managed today, it's a little bit of a challenge. Microsoft, although it has lots of tools available, doesn't make it super easy to be able to keep track of and monitor and prevent those changes from getting out of control. And if you think about a concept which we refer to here as joiner, mover, leaver, think of people who come into the organization, they're given a set of access. And then over time, they might move to a new function or a new role. And as they move into that new role, they get more permissions and more access to more things. They might get involved in special projects. And as part of those special projects, they're given even more access to more things. But as you start to go back in time and you look at what they really have access to, in a lot of cases, they don't really need access to all of the things that they have to do their jobs effectively, or fully for that matter. And what happens over time is now you actually leave an area of exposure. If an insider who is malicious has access to that information, they can take that information and they can take it outside of the organization. If there's not a malicious user, but more of an ignorant user, one who's not really paying attention to what they have access to, they could very much inadvertently expose the data. And that becomes a problem as well, all right? And so part of what we're trying to do with our security solutions is I think of these kinds of things as really just foundational security, foundational types of capability that everybody needs to do, but the reality is most people don't, right? And just to give you an idea, if you're to talk to an IT admin, and has anyone here ever done administration of Active Directory? Probably a few of you, right? Yeah. First off, it's hard to just go get information about what a user has access to. If I just want to say, hey, what does Jim Hansen have access to? Like, what do you do? Probably have to go poke around within Active Directory to go find it, right? The second challenge is that when you are looking at changing permissions for a particular user, it's time consuming. You have to go find it. First off, the IT person probably has no idea whether or not the person should have access or not. So that person submits a help desk ticket, they ask for access, and they got to go find the data owner for that particular set of information or folder to say, hey, should this person have access to it or not? And then, of course, they go and update it. Now, this time-consuming back and forth then also leads to that same problem, which is over time, cruft just creates, or rather becomes part of what you see inside of there. I've already mentioned this whole joiner, mover, leaver thing. So as people come in and move and so forth, that's a problem. And if you think about it, it's this chaotic permissions management, or rather lack thereof, which ends up really leading to what is really a liability for the organization. And so when you think about what we're doing with this product, Access Rights Manager, it really is foundational security. I think about it as basic security hygiene, right? I'll ask a silly question. Like, how many of you brushed your teeth today? Yeah, like you probably did. You don't have to answer that, by the way. It's okay. How many of you, changed your socks and other things, right? Of course you do. Like you do these things. Okay, maybe somebody doesn't there, but you do these things on a regular basis because it's good personal hygiene. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why aren't organizations doing this for their business as well? And the reality is, I've talked to a number of different customers, even within our ecosystem, and they tell me, yeah, God, I would love to. We just don't know how to. And the reality is they also don't really have the time to be able to do it effectively, right? So it's this general inability to control what is really this basic foundational type of capability that we're trying to help solve for with this particular product. And I'm going to walk you through what that actually means here in just a second. Now, let's see, I need to figure out how to get this thing into my virtual environment. Hopefully it's still on. And there's this fancy Control F thing. Can you guys see that? Now, how do I actually make that happen? All right, hold on. I got to go get back out of here. Let's see.
Colon WQ.
Bang.
Bang.
Yeah, Jimmy.
Windows.
Windows. Let's see. So I'm here, right? Okay, and I just exit out of the...
Escape key solves all. Does it require a right click or something?
Okay. Got it. Am I there? Now, how do I get this thing over there?
Drag it over.
Oh, drag it over. Where do I drag it over to?
Dragon.
Oh, I see. All right, magic.
Use the hard
All right, and it's going to show it here too, right?
AV equipment.
No,
Here.
I need to do
Windows P.
Windows P.
Oh,
Oh, that didn't do it, did it?
don't know why it's saying that.
What did it say?
Because your Windows can't project.
There we go. I should be able to duplicate, right?
Yeah, duplicates. There you go.
See, that's why we have you guys here. It's to help us figure these things out. All right, so now I see what you see. Perfect. Okay. Now let's put this guy back into full screen. And there we go. Okay, and now I think I can do some Alt-Tab stuff. There we go. Perfect. All right, so back to what I was saying. So now imagine you're an IT admin, right? And you want to use this product, Access Rights Manager, to be able to go manage the rights within your environment. Now, you know that most organizations are broken down into various departments. There might be certain projects or functions which might get their own folders on a file server or on OneDrive or on SharePoint. Well, what we can do here within Access Rights Manager is, first off, I'm just going to go take a look at all the things that we see in the environment that are related to sales. By typing in sales into this little search bar here, what you see is all the different resources that we have visibility into that talk about sales. You can see here there's a group for sales, there is a directory for sales, you see some exchange-related things and so forth and so on. So this is actually going out and scanning the entire Active Directory environment to find all of those resources that we can actually affect change on or get visibility into from within the application. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and click on sales. And what this is going to do is it's going to take me over to what is a resource view. And this resource view, you can see here on the left, now gives me a breakdown of where this particular folder exists. In this case, it's on this file server. You can see all of the other folders that we have here as well. And you can see under here, there's sales. You can see there's a little bit of data sitting inside of there. On the right-hand side, you can also see the full list of who actually has permissions to this folder. Now, just real quickly, I'm just going to hide this little guy just for a second, and I'm going to click on full control. What this means is that I'm actually now showing all of the users within this folder that have access to just this folder, right? And in this case, these are the ones that have full control access. And you can see it's mostly admins. There's a system account there. You can see that by this little lock icon, that these are the ones that are getting inherited from their parent. And again, just this alone is more visibility than most folks get by just simply going out and looking at Active Directory. You can do it just by clicking in and looking at these things. Now, what I'm going to do now is I just want to sort of switch gears here for just a second. I'm going to go actually look at a different folder. And this one's going to give you, oops, hold on a second. I went a little too fast there. Hang on. Marketing. We're going to take a look at the marketing folder. And in this case, I'm going to run my search again. I can see here, here's my directory. I'm going to click on that guy, and what you're going to see here is that this one actually has other levels of control with other users as well. You can see here that there are people with full control. You've got folks with modify access and read and execute and list directory and so forth and so on. And if you remember this little guy that I dropped down a few minutes ago, what you can do here is if I were to just click on marketing, right? What this is actually going to do is it's going to allow me to see a flat list of all of the users that actually have access to this folder. But in addition to that, you can also see that under this column here where it says how often granted, you can actually see how many of them have multiple paths into this particular folder. So you could, for example, go and remove them as an account from that folder, but because they have other points of entry through other groups and so forth, they actually still have access, right? Again, trying to figure that out with Active Directory by itself is pretty difficult to do. And you can also, of course, see how the inheritance breaks down and where that inheritance flows in to the overall permissions for this folder as well. So this is just, again, just a snapshot of what you can do here, just in terms of being able to get some basic foundational visibility into what you need to see within Active Directory itself. Or again, SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, we actually cover all of those. And what I'm showing here, of course, is just a file server. Now, some of you may have looked at the screen here, and if you look on the left-hand side, what you can see are these little green arrows, right? You might ask yourself, like, what are those little green arrows? What do they actually mean? Well, if I were to go over here and click on, let's say, marketing again, what this is actually telling me is that the permissions on one or more of the subfolders within marketing are actually different from the parent. Now, this happens for all kinds of reasons, right? But it also may not be something that you want. And I can think of some use cases. For example, you might have a folder for corp dev, and inside that folder, you might have another folder for M&A. And inside of that, you might have other folders for specific things that you're looking at. And not everybody needs to have access to all of them, so you might have differing permissions. But in a lot of cases, you just don't, right? You actually create the permissions in such a way that everyone can do that. You can inherit the permissions down and so forth and so on. But the point is, as you take a look at this, you can start to drill into the details and you can get a pretty good picture of what's going on. Now, I'm going to pop this little guy up here for a second. And this is just yet another incremental view that you can use to understand what that permissions landscape looks like. If I were to go look at the press folder here, for example, I can actually get a little bit more information about the specific users and what permissions have been added and what permissions have been removed from them as compared to the parent folder. So you can see, for example, Emily here has additional permissions beyond what the parent folder actually has. Again, might be what you want, but it may not be as well, right?
Excuse me. What about Linux servers that may be joined to Active Directory?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if it's in Active Directory, if it's within ARM and connected to Active Directory, we have visibility into those as well. I don't have any that I can show you here in the demo environment, but basically you're using the connections into the Linux environment with which to be able to do that translation of permissions back and forth. In addition to that, though, we also have some fairly rich APIs that when organizations are looking, let's say, to hook into their HR system or into their ERP system, we have the ability to connect those into Access Rights Manager as well.
So you're only, is that only for permissions for application runtimes, or is that for file and directory structures? What are you actually exposing on the Linux side?
Yes and yes, yeah. So we actually cover both applications and we also cover file servers as well. And then, for example, the example that I just showed you a moment ago is an example of file server specific permissions, right?
Yeah, on the bottom, in that tree, you showed there's things like Easy Connect CSV, Easy Connect SQL. Are those your custom stuff that you're talking about, the API?
There are some things that we provide out of the box. We effectively today, out of the box, just hook into most of the Office 365 tools. So you see SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, file servers, Active Directory, both on-prem and Azure Active Directory as well. And then anything beyond that Microsoft basic stack would be API level integration.
So what is that Easy Connect stuff? I mean, what would you see there? I mean,
again, maybe like an HR system, for example, right? If I wanted to go connect into, SAP, for example, we actually now provide some basic SAP connection out of the box. But you might want to go in depth into various resource pools or what have you within SAP that you want to get more deep information. If you wanted to go connect to, say, Box or Dropbox and you wanted to start controlling and auditing permissions within that, then you have the ability via Easy Connect to be able to connect into those things in a similar way.
So I'm familiar with a couple of tools that are in this space, and the question I have, I mean, obviously IT, this is great, by the way, being able to get visibility into these different directories and things like that, but one of the things that I don't see, and maybe it's just in a different view, is context. So, I mean, for instance, marketing, got a exclamation point because the rights are different there. How do I know that maybe there's data in that marketing folder that I don't want people to see because it's sensitive, GDPR,
Sure.
that kind of stuff? Do you have that kind of visibility?
We do, and actually the way that we handle that is through what we call data owners, and I'll show that in a few minutes around what we do from a role-based access perspective. But yeah, effectively, we will delegate control to a data owner, and maybe it's the person who's running marketing or their designated person who's responsible for making sure that only the right people have access to it. Because as I mentioned, the IT folks generally don't know. They have no idea who should have access to what. So that delegation of rights down to a data owner who can be responsible for that information is something that we also then provide a portal within this that those users can log into. That's all they see is their little slice of the information so that they control it, they manage it, and they can actually update it directly without actually involving IT, right? Now again, I'll show you just a glimpse of that here in a couple minutes.
And how do you know sales is sales? You know, are you looking, is it a keyword match?
That's the way I look this up in this way, yeah. So in this case, I just did a keyword search within that search bar at the very top, looking for the specific directory. And of course, this is a smaller environment, right? I knew I had sales there, so that was an easy one. But in a larger environment, it's the same kind of thing. If you know what server it's on, you can actually type in the server name, or you can just look up that share or that folder, and then you can go navigate down into that resource based on that tree that popped up. And here, just to show you that one more time here. If I click right here and were to type in sales, it actually gives you that full list across the various resources that we have, exactly what resources are available, and any description, information, and so forth, so you can figure out, okay, this is the thing that I actually need to go look at.
Right, and I think that's kind of where I'm going with this. If I do have data in SharePoint or somewhere else, is it only telling me that it's sales because there's something flagged sales?
Or named.
Yeah.
Named, right?
Yeah, it's based on the name. That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah, meaning that this is not doing some kind of sales data lookup, if you will. We are very much looking at it from a point of view of the folders, the way that Active Directory is organizing the information, or again, SharePoint and OneDrive we also have connections into as well. So it just kind of depends on how the organization has that structured out, and we can provide the visibility into it through that mechanism.
Yeah, so they'll have to pay their price if they have sloppy naming.
That's
right?
exactly right.
You're not
yeah.
going to fix that for them.
That's right. Well, and this is actually one of the things. So the three main tenets of what we do with Access Rights Manager is, number one, we give you visibility into it, right? So you can see, like, what is this morass of craziness that we've created over the last several years, because that happens, right?
Yeah.
And then number two, we also provide audit ability as well. So if customers are using this, and I'll show this here in just a minute, but you also, every change that's made, we actually audit completely. Right? So if we wanted to go in, for example, and give permissions to a group or change permissions, or let's say we see this weird inheritance structure and we're like, God, that just doesn't make any sense, then what we'll do is we can actually just override that, re-inherit all the permissions down, and then track that change so that it can be audited and reported on later. You got a question?
Yeah, so service account roles, which are probably the hardest thing to manage.
Yeah, so service accounts are also here. I mean, a service account effectively is an account within Active Directory, so we can control those. Like, and to give you an example here, you can see, let me get out of the search window, right here, here's an example of a system account right there, right? You can control that, but if there's other service accounts that are required to have certain access to things, they can be completely managed and controlled through Access Rights Manager as well.
And then are you tying that in with Azure AD for the Azure side,
Yes.
for the service account roles for build? Okay.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay. Now, just to move on here real quickly, when we click on that press folder, there's a couple other things here that I'll point out, and I just mentioned this auditability. You see this little orange icon right on the left-hand side. If I hover over that, I can actually see the full audit trail of changes that have been made related to that folder over time. In addition to that, I could also just click on that because maybe I want to go add some additional information. Maybe I want to see the full logbook, and that logbook is actually what we use to audit all of this change activity that takes place, right? And you can see some of the changes here. Now, this is not something that somebody types in. This is all of that automated componentry that goes in. So when you, for example, add permissions to a group, it will automatically tell you, hey, here are the things specifically that we're going to do as part of this change that you're requesting. And so all of that gets completely audited, tracked, and it remains here forever. We don't delete it out. And that's because for, of course, GDPR and other kinds of compliance regulations, you got to be able to go back and understand, hey, for this folder, which may have customer data or sensitive data of some kind, you want to be able to go back and report on that data in some kind of effective way, right? Okay. All right. So the last thing that I'll show you here, Liz, is let's say that we actually want to report in more detail on actually what this file is, okay? Because at the end of the day, it's great to get a one-time view, but I may want to actually get this thing delivered to somebody so they can actually take a look at it. If I right-click on this marketing folder, what I can do here is I can run this report, which says, if I can read it, it's actually pretty small. Probably should have brought my glasses today, and I didn't. Who has access where, right? And so when you run this report, this actually gives you a bunch of different options that you can use to actually generate this data. In this case, let's just call this marketing folder. You can add a comment if you want. There's this notion of paths and organizational what does that say? Categories, right? An organizational category you can think of kind of like a container. If I have a data owner, and that data owner is responsible for a whole bunch of different things, I can actually switch from just looking at a pure path to those things that that data owner is responsible for. So that way, the next time that this report runs, I can run it for the user and what they need to see as compared to a specific folder or specific groups of folders. So it transitions the way that people think about permissions management and permissions delegation by putting it into the hands of the user that's responsible, again, as compared to just hard-coded UNC paths of where I want to go look. And that's pretty important as well. You'll also note that it's obviously just did this, what you'd expect, which is it populates the marketing folder since I selected that. There's various filter options that you can select. There's settings that can be applied to this thing. For example, maybe I want to look at this in the context of an ACL list. Alternatively, you can actually just look at a group structure. If there is, for example, a non-technical AD person who's responsible for this, they probably don't want to look at ACLs. They're not going to understand what that means. So we can actually give them more of a group structure or a user view or just a nice compact view that they can look at. You know, in this case, if I were to do a user view, and I click Start, and by the way, there's other options here too, which just for the sake of time, I'll run through. What this is going to do is it's going to go out and grab all of the information related to all of the subfolders and users within that marketing group, and it's going to generate this view that I can now take and I can send. Now, I didn't show this a moment ago, and I meant to, but there was also an option there that said Run immediately, all right? And I can actually run this on a schedule as well. So if I want to actually take this and say, hey, you know what? Emily over there needs to see all of this stuff on a weekly basis so she can go in and evaluate to make sure that everything's good, then I can actually deliver that to Emily on a regular basis, okay? All right. Now, just for sake of time, because I'm getting the cane here, let's see. What I want to do is I want to shift gears, and this is the third piece of what's interesting about Access Rights Manager. And obviously, as you kind of look around here, there's so much functionality built into it. I'm just trying to highlight some of the really key things that what I find most of our customers find interesting and valuable about this thing. And what I'll do here is I want to go in here and I want to show you that user management. And this is about how we delegate access to different users, right? So we've got this notion of an administrator, you've got a data owner, an auditor, a requester, and so forth. And the requester is for somebody who wants to go into the portal and say, hey, I want to request access to this particular resource. And we actually make that available through access rights. And these are all the predefined ones, but users can also create their own roles as well. And they do that by going into this role management view here. Oops, except I clicked it twice. And then you can start to granularly define exactly what people can do, not just within Active Directory, but across OneDrive and SharePoint and all of the other applications that they're actually hooked into, okay? Now, let me get back out of here real quick, and I want to show you one other piece. How many of you are familiar with an acronym called Agdlp? Does that sound familiar to anybody? Okay, so for anybody who's gone through Microsoft certification, this has been around for about 15 years or so, but it's the principle by which Microsoft has said, hey, this is how you should manage groups and access within Active Directory. And effectively, if you think about the A means accounts, the G stands for global groups, right? You have local domain groups. That's the AGDL, domain local groups. And then you have permissions, the P, right? And this is the structure by which you're supposed to create these things. And basically, this breaks down like this. If you want to go create a new share or a new provide somebody access, you want to use this structure, because what you don't want to do is start granularly adding people into different places. So you create these things called resource groups, right? Now, to do that requires a whole lot of stuff. You have to go create all of these different resource groups, and the way that that gets done is kind of like this. If you look at this little wizard here, this is a wizard that we created, which basically makes it super easy to just have Access Rights Manager go and create all of these things for you, okay? You can create access categories. So think of this as when you create a new folder called marketing, and I want to grant somebody full control, you'd probably call the resource group marketing_FC, full control. And of course, with the other permissions, you would define it a slightly different way. And that way, when you want to add a user, you wouldn't add them to the folder, you would actually add them to the resource group, which is already defined on the actual local group, which is on the environment. Now, this is what allows us to be able to do this in an automated way. We also have more of a comprehensive naming convention that you can apply, because when you actually look at resource groups and how they're defined, you'll see this little crazy share folder name down here at the bottom. If you almost every Active Directory environment, you're going to see this. And the reality is this: when you want to go create these groups, it is truly, truly a pain in the butt. Microsoft makes it super easy, but it's not, because you got to go create all of these different groups, and if they're not created, then you got to go sit down and you got to create all of them, add the users, and it's kind of a nightmare. So if I wanted to, for example, go in here to the marketing, and I wanted to, let's say, modify access rights, I can actually do that, right? So I can go in, I can create a new access right for this. This is going to pop up a view that gives me the listing of things, which, by the way, I didn't show you because I just ran out of time, but I can decide who actually gets to do what. In this case, Anthony Admin here gets to have to modify full control, modify, read and execute, and so forth, right? And this is where it gets kind of cool. If I go in here and I press clear, and let's say that I have a guy named Chris. Oh, hold on, see. This is a bad demo because I forgot to put it in a notepad so I could copy it. But let's say Chris, let's see, and Emily, right? We'll just do that. I'm just typing it here just to make it simple, so I think I can highlight that. Let's see, let's get that. All right, so basically I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to paste that in. And what this is going to do is apparently not work properly because I didn't do it right. Let's try this. All right. Anyway, if I pasted that in with a comma in between the two names, then what would actually happen is that it's going to give me a listing of those users, and I can just drag and drop them into the appropriate locations, right? And I do want to show you this because this is just super important. I know that Jenny's going to be okay with me taking 2 more minutes. All right, I'm going to drag and drop this guy to modify. He doesn't know Jenny well enough. Jenny can yell at me later. And I click on the apply button. What this is going to do now is it's going to run in there. It's going to calculate, are all the resource groups that I need, are they already created? If they're not created, it's going to give me a listing of all of the things that I need to do in order to actually go create this. Now this will take just a second, but as soon as that's done, then it will show me. As soon as it's done, it'll show me. And then what I can do is I can either accept that and have it go make those changes, or I can choose not to, and I can save it for later. I can even schedule this for another time, and so forth. And this is the downside of
running. So how is this licensed? By resource, by user, by a service fee?
In terms of the licensing for the product?
Yeah.
It's based on the the enabled Active Directory accounts that somebody has.
So by account?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and that includes service accounts, because service accounts can be compromised too.
Yeah.
And it's what all right, this will finish at some point.
Yeah.
But rest assured, if this thing finishes, this little local virtual machine, you click on that little all changes, and it'll actually show you all of those resource groups that are going to get created automatically. And again, you can then schedule it or just execute on it. Okay, so it's kind of cool. I mean, the point of all of this is that when you think about just basic access rights management, again, basic security hygiene, you need to be able to keep the infrastructure controlled. This really is a cross between an operations kind of use case and a security use case. What we find is that most customers are buying it because they actually do need to lock their permissions down, and they just have no control over it whatsoever, right? But the operations guys are typically the ones that are actually using it.